Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. SpaceX is currently T-minus 29 minutes, 30 seconds, and counting to its first launch from the West Coast, sending up another batch of satellites on behalf of the National Reconnaissance Office, or the NRO, believed to be Starshield satellites, an unspecified amount of the government variant of the Starlink satellites. I'm joined behind the scenes by our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's running the technical operations of the broadcast. Our launch photography team has this evening off, as this is a West Coast venture. Busily preparing, though, for quite a busy stretch of days here over the next week, as we've got two marquee missions coming up from Blue Origin and SpaceX. And both Firefly Aerospace as well as Japan-based iSpace are getting ready to launch their respective lunar landers on board a Falcon 9 rocket from back here in Florida at the Kennedy Space Center. That's coming up next Wednesday. The two marquee missions, obviously, I'm referring to are the launch of Flight 7 for the Starship program and the inaugural flight of the Blue Origin New Glenn rocket. And actually, I'll call an audible, Stephen, if we could take a peek over at Launch Complex 36 for a moment. Get that ready behind the scenes. Earlier this evening, Blue Origin raised its New Glenn rocket vertical at the pad. Is the first time that it had the full flight-worthy stack out there at Launch Complex 36. Last time the rocket was vertical, it was the booster in the second stage that will be supporting the NG-1 mission, currently set to lift off no earlier than 1 a.m., the start of a 3-hour window on Sunday, Sunday, January 12th. This time, though, the rocket is out there with the payload fairing that supports the Blue Ring Pathfinder. If you saw the tweet that Dave Limp, the CEO of Blue Origin, posted, the fairing is also emblazoned with the mission patch design for the NG-1 launch. If you'd like to keep tabs on what's going on with New Glenn or Starship Flight 7, you can always hop over to our 24-hour live stream that is Launchpad Live right here on our YouTube channel. So I'll say now is a good time to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you don't miss our live launch opportunities when it comes to the flights of these two heavy lift rockets. Turning our attention back over to the West Coast with the Falcon 9 getting ready to lift off here in 26 minutes and 16 seconds. SpaceX has confirmed that fueling is now underway on the vehicle, which does lock SpaceX into a T0 here at the start of the window at 7:53 p.m. Pacific, 10:53 p.m. Eastern, 03:53 UTC for our friends around the world. For the caveat, this is not a live picture of the Falcon 9 rocket yet. We will bring those to you as soon as we are able. It gives you an idea of the conditions around Vandenberg right now. In fact, very clear skies. This is the Falcon 9 rocket that will be launching the mission here in the next 25 and a half minutes. Taking a live look from a satellite view, this coming from the GOES West satellite, managed by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. See their icon in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Clear conditions around the area of Vandenberg. No fog of which to speak, no clouds hanging over Vandenberg Space Force Base tonight. So for those in the vicinity in the immediate vicinity should be a pretty clear view. Obviously, do know that conditions are much less visible in the greater Los Angeles area. I know we have a lot of folks that join in for live launch coverage who live in the greater LA vicinity. Certainly keeping you in our thoughts as the fires continue on in that part of the Golden State, and hopefully those will get knocked down soon without too much more loss of life or property. SpaceX did confirm that all systems on the Falcon 9 rocket are looking good for tonight's launch. So, from a technical standpoint, there shouldn't be an issue with getting to see the liftoff of the vehicle on the NROL 153 mission coming up here in about 23 and a half minutes. As we're rolling on through the count, want to thank the more than 3,200 of you who are watching with us live tonight. Appreciate you being with us here on a Thursday evening. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button on this stream. It'll allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage as we continue on through the count. Also want to thank our moderators hanging out with us in the live chat, Mark Otto, Callistia Lee, and Aussie Space Girl was with us earlier over on Launchpad Live, although it's getting late there in Australia, so she may have taken off for today at this point. We're also powered by a wonderful channel member community who makes these live streams possible. So thanks to folks like Roddy Mom 12, Patty Chichil, Ryan Snyder, Ian Lita, Lloyd Green, Sulfur for Lunch, Butterfly, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our member-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Speaking of our channel member community, I want to thank Mark Otto for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Mark. To our 10 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. And a welcome as well to Elaine McMurray joining with us at the pad leader level. Last but not least, if you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings on in the realm of space and spaceflight, you can use that YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we continue on through the count, but you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now at the same time, and that is always greatly appreciated. To that end, I want to thank Theodore Kilson for a $5 super chat, joining us from Walmart in Wisconsin. Appreciate you being with us tonight. Also, thanks to Ramraj MGV for a 20 rupee super chat as well. Thank you, Ramraj. As we're now less than 21 minutes to the planned liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket, we'll go ahead and step through the countdown timeline, but we'll be somewhat brisk with the milestones that we've already moved past and get you caught up to where we are right now with the count. The go for prop load was given, as we previously mentioned. Fueling began at the T-minus 35-minute mark with the loading of RP-1. That's a rocket-grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen began flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes is when they started loading cryogenic helium on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same is true on the second stage a few minutes thereafter. T-minus 23 minutes is when second stage RP-1 loading wrapped up. T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process got underway. That's when SpaceX is conditioning the feed lines at the pad prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. We see that manifest visually as the so-called big vent that sets up second stage LOX load to begin. That's our next milestone upcoming, and that'll start at the 16-minute mark. T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. That involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. It helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before flight, the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence gets underway. It starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, or the strong back, reclines about 13 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket here at Vandenberg. It stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before launch, the first stage LOX tank is full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute after that, at which point the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as the call is issued for the Falcon 9 to be in startup, controls handed over from ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch 45 seconds before flight. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. That's coming up once again in 7:53 p.m. Pacific, 10:53 p.m. Eastern, 03:53 UTC, or in T-minus 17 minutes and 39 seconds. Time now, T-minus 17 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. About a minute away from second stage LOX load beginning. It's not very often that the NRO has a lot to say when it comes to really much of what it does, specifically with the proliferated architecture. That said, during last month's Space Force Association's Space Power Conference in Orlando, they did have some representatives from the NRO and the U.S. Space Force take part in one of a number of panels that were held over a series of 3 days. This one happened to be the final day of the conference, and they did touch on the proliferated architecture. So want to go ahead and go to a little bit of sound that we have here. This is from Mr. T.J. Lincoln, the National Reconnaissance Office. He is the Director of Mission Operations Directorate for the NRO, talking at a bit of a high level, but good to hear some insight on the proliferated architecture and some of its goals. So let's listen in. Again, this is T.J. Lincoln.
You hear about the proliferated architectures. We talk about that today. We operate multiple dozens of exquisite capability. We have done that for since 1961. But we are going to a proliferated of hundreds of capabilities across different phenomenologies. That's based on high-speed compute, a global network, advanced intelligence, artificial intelligence as well, which is going to really enable us to do rapid retasking. It's going to be direct access in theater so that those folks can task, but also working with our Guardians out there as we start to do that global allocation and mission management mission. That's where the Guardians are going to bring to bear how we get those allocations into the warfighter. That's also going to also have meantime revisit rates are going to be significantly reduced so we can maintain those tracks and targets. But it's not done just on the proliferated architecture. We need those other national technical means to close all those areas. They also will tip and queue, and also be able to do orchestration so that one sensor can see something, tip another sensor, and so we can rapidly get after that intelligence challenge. And then it's all brought together by the amazing ground systems of our Ground Enterprise Directorate and our Communications Directorate, because you need those. That's the secret sauce to get that data out to the people that need it.
And again, that was a clip from part of our coverage of the Space Force Association Space Power Conference. Now, T-minus 14 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. We should be getting views of the Falcon 9 rocket here in just a moment, but before we do, want to go to one more piece of tape from that conference. You'll hear, as well as from TJ Lincoln, also be hearing from Colonel Eric Zierabinski, who is the director of the Office of Space Launch for the U.S. Space Force, talking about the role of automation on the proliferated architecture. Before we go to that clip, just real briefly want to thank a few folks for their support tonight. Our thanks to Red Sky for a $2 super chat, Jimmy C for the $10 super chat. Thank you, Jimmy. Musician75, one of our channel members, with a $2 super chat. Thank you. Says, thanks for the fabulous coverage. Appreciate the kind words. StormVet6 with a $10 super chat. Checking in from Land O'Lakes, Florida. Saying, let's light this candle. Cindy Kirkman with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Cindy. And thanks to Toby Wobe for joining us the channel membership again at the pad leader level. Glad to have you with us, Toby, who then turns around and gifts 5 memberships. Appreciate that generosity. To our 5 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Toby in the live chat if you haven't already. Now let's go ahead and go to that clip I was just teasing. Once again, you're going to be hearing from TJ Lincoln, the Director of Mission Operations Directorate with the NRO, as well as Colonel Eric Zierabinski, the Director of the Office of Space Launch for the U.S. Space Force, about how automation is set to play a role with the proliferated architecture.
Automation doesn't start with the proliferated architecture, quite honestly. I've challenged our team since I took over in 2019 to automate even today some of our exquisite systems, because the best use of our amazing talent within the NRO, within operations, isn't actually necessarily being out there sending commands to a vehicle or prosecuting the collection mission. If I can automate those things in the day of the life, I can take those people, those incredibly talented people, put them in those places where I'm challenged. How am I going to develop better collection strategies? How am I going to develop tactics, techniques, and procedures to thwart threats? How am I going to take those talented to do operational planning and integration with U.S. Space Command? So anything I can operate in a day in the life of operations, it absolutely is essential. And we've done that already, gone from, let's say 17 folks on a crew to 3 operating an entire overhead constellation. That's pretty amazing. So automation is absolutely incredibly important today, not just as the proliferated architectures are delivered. The good thing about automation, at least with the proliferated, is it's being baked in early on. So as the ops lead for the NRO, I'm demanding those things are built into the system, because there's no way to operate a proliferated multiple hundreds of satellites the same way we do today. And so the mission management has to happen. The duty cycle tasking has to happen. The retasking has to happen in an automated way, with humans on the loop to be able to tweak that, to make sure that we're meeting the operational assessment needs that we have to. So that's where we need to really leverage the automations to get after that piece of it. So that's kind of where I see it going today, but we're not waiting for proliferation to automate and to really drive that. But operations will change, because now you have to also be very cognizant of all those systems that you're operating maybe in a traditional sense from a protect and defend, but then how you're going to protect and defend those that proliferated constellation going forward.
It's a mouthful.
Can I add a little on I'll go to the back end of part of this, is automation, AI, ML.
is also, it's not just about the proliferation, it's about how do I get the data out faster, right? So the NRO has been typically known, right, we get data out there in hours and maybe minutes. We've got to get to seconds, right? We've got to get the data in the hands of decision makers and warfighters within seconds. And automation, AI, and ML are going to make that happen.
Yeah, and there's things such as auto-target recognition and the processing to be able to know what that is when we image it, or what that signal is, so that then it's put into those warfighting tools and those displays, so that they don't have to make they have to interpret the data. Right, to your point there, incredibly important as we move forward as well.
Now T-minus 9 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. Again, those clips you were just seeing were part of our coverage of the Space Force Association's Space Power Conference, the second annual Space Power Conference that took place just last month. Looking at the conference schedule, it'll be another busy year on that front. We'll be at the SpaceCom conference here in Orlando coming up at the end of this month. So if you happen to spot myself or either my colleagues around there, feel free to flag us down, say hello. We love meeting folks out in the world. And we are just now getting our first views of the Falcon 9 rocket there at Space Launch Complex 4 East. You can see a clear view down at Vandenberg as fueling continues with the Falcon 9 rocket. We're now less than a minute away from the start of the engine chill sequence. According to the SpaceX commentator, both the range is green, weather is green. That was a tracking camera looking at the moon as SpaceX is just showing off the visibility there at Vandenberg. So should get some nice tracking views of the Falcon 9 as it makes its descent. Because there are Starshield satellites on board for the NRO, they will not be showing second stage views following stage separation. So at that point, there will just be onboard camera views from the Falcon 9's first stage. As SpaceX is getting ready to post some graphics talking about the Falcon 9 rocket, let's go ahead and talk about SpaceX's workhorse vehicle, which stands 70 meters or 229 feet tall, has diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. The fairing halves flying today. One is flying for its 9th time, the other for its 16th time. Payload fairings, after separation, splashed down in the Pacific Ocean under the support of parachutes. Second stage is powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle, which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, producing more than 220,500 pounds of thrust. Falcon 9 first stage represents the 2/3 the vehicle's height. This particular booster is B1071, which is going for its 22nd flight today. In fact, the booster that is supporting tomorrow morning's Starlink launch, that'll be booster 1067, which will be making a record-breaking 25th launch and landing attempt. Falcon 9 booster supporting this launch is going to be landing on that drone ship. That is, of course, I Still Love You, positioned out in the Pacific Ocean. If successful, this will mark the 116th booster landing on this particular drone ship and the 394th booster landing to date. Taking a look at our live chat real quick here, I want to thank a few folks for their support. But first off, broad thank you to the now more than 13,000 of you who are joining with us live. If you haven't already, be sure to click that like button to allow some more folks to find their way into this live coverage. Now, T-minus 4 minutes, 17 seconds and counting. The strong back retract sequence is now underway. You see those clamp arms opening up just beneath the payload fairings. Transport erector will then move away from the Falcon 9 rocket about 13 degrees and stay in that position until liftoff. There you see the TE now in motion. Want to thank Stephen Remy for a $5 super chat, saying thanks for your great coverage as always. Thank you, Stephen, for supporting us in this coverage. Also want to thank channel member Artemis on two fronts. One for a very generous $100 super chat. Really appreciate that, Artemis, on this first Vandenberg launch of the year. See the comment, and respectfully we try to keep things a little more serious than doing accents that are not mine. So I'll just give it a more demure Leroy Jenkins as a tip of the hat to Artemis. I also want to thank them for gifting 100 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that level of generosity, Artemis. Thank you so much. For the call for stage 1 LOX load being complete, just awaiting the same to be true on the Falcon 9's second stage. And the Falcon 9 will be fully fueled for liftoff. Also want to thank Daniel Fletcher joining us with the channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome, Daniel. SpaceX reports no issues being tracked as we're now just about 2.5 minutes from liftoff. And thanks to Space Pony for a $2 super chat, asking if I'm going to be hightailing it to Starbase after New Glenn. Unfortunately, it seems the fates will not align for me personally to travel down to Starbase this go around. There's just too much happening here in Florida for me to make that trek. Plus, there's always the possibility that New Glenn may slip another day, and so I'll be here covering that, and we'll have our forces down in Florida alongside our streaming partners Lab Padre to cover Starship Flight 7. And then, of course, midweek next week, we're also looking at the launch of Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost lunar lander and iSpace's Hakuto R. So I'll be here to help cover that as well. For the call for second stage LOX load complete, you're now seeing the ground gas closeouts. Coming up in about 15 or so seconds, we should be hearing the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup. Let's listen in.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Good call there. Next call we're waiting for is the launch director to give their go for launch. That's coming up here in just seconds.
LD is go for launch.
And with that go for launch, we're 40 seconds away from liftoff. So we're going to step back and listen to the final 30 seconds of the count, and we'll be back with you on the other side for additional commentary.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9. Go SpaceX, go NROL 153.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
At T plus 30 seconds and counting, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Slick 4E at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. Now coming up shortly, the vehicle will be passing through max Q, which is the point in the mission profile where the vehicle experiences the greatest amount of aerodynamic pressure.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
Now, it doesn't look like we're going to catch it in the view today, but as many of you know, there are multiple wildfires currently burning around the Southern California area. Our thoughts go out to those affected. Good call out there for Max Q. Our thoughts go out to those affected by the fires, and we here at SpaceX want to give a huge thank you to the firefighters working to put them out, as well as the other emergency crews and volunteers.
Telemetry nominal.
As well as the emergency crews and volunteers working to keep everyone safe. And we heard that good call out there for Max Q, which again is when the vehicle experiences the greatest amount of aerodynamic stress. Now coming up next, we'll have 3 events happening in quick succession, starting with...
chill.
Good call out there. We'll have 3 events happening in quick succession, starting with MECO, followed by Stage SEP and SES-1. Main engine cutoff, or MECO, is where all 9 Merlin 1D engines shut down to slow the vehicle down in preparation for stage separation, which is where the first stage separates from the second stage. Followed by this, the MVAC engine on the second stage will light, which is called out as Second Engine Start 1, or SES-1. Now this engine burn lasting several minutes will propel the second stage and the payload to orbit.
A good ascension of the Falcon 9 rocket so far, beginning SpaceX's first Vandenberg launch of 2025. Let's listen for those call-outs for these events, starting with MECO.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
All good callouts, and our last view of the Falcon 9's upper stage that we'll see during this flight, that look up at the Merlin vacuum engine. Again, as the SpaceX commentator noted, at the request of the National Reconnaissance Office, SpaceX will not be showing upper stage views of the Falcon 9 rocket from here on. So our last glimpse was our last glimpse. Did hear the call for fairing separation, though. Seeing the lights of the California coastline as the Falcon 9 first stage booster continues its climb. Rocket is flying in a southeasterly trajectory going along the coast of California and Mexico, targeting a landing once again on the SpaceX drone ship called, of course, I Still Love You. Coming up on the 4th minute into flight. Start of the entry burn will begin at about T plus 6 minutes and 11 seconds. Last about 20 seconds in total. At the call that the Falcon 9 first and second stages are both following nominal trajectories, so all going well with this first Vandenberg flight of 2025 so far. Taking a look at the telemetry data there in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, it appears the booster has reached its apogee and is now making its descent towards the drone ship out there in the Pacific Ocean. You'll see the speedometer continue to climb until the start of that entry burn, when SpaceX will reignite 3 out of the 9 Merlin engines on the Falcon 9's first stage, beginning to slow the vehicle down quite dramatically. So you'll see that speedometer number begin to plummet as The vehicle is slowed down by the power of the Merlins as well as increased atmospheric drag. Now, a little more than 5 minutes into flight. A look up now through the inner stage there on the Falcon 9's booster. Once again, the entry burn set to begin at about T plus 6 minutes and 11 seconds, so we're less than a minute away from that milestone. This booster, after making its 20-second liftoff, looking for a good 20-second landing. Now about 20 seconds till entry burn.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Good call for the start of entry burn, and there you see it now beginning on your screen. Once again, this burn set to last about 20 seconds in total. When New Glenn's first stage booster goes for its landing on its particular landing vessel named Jacqueline, it will also go through a similar sequence where it makes an entry burn using 3 out of its 7 BE4 engines for a brief entry burn, and then during the landing sequence it will reignite its 3 gimbaling engines, then pare that down from 3 to 1 in the final seconds of the landing burn as its landing legs are deployed. Now, a little more than 7 minutes into flight, we're coming up on the start of the landing burn here for this Falcon 9 rocket. That's coming up beginning at about T plus 7 minutes and 48 seconds. Falcon 9 now transonic, traveling below the speed of sound. Less than 10 seconds to the landing burn. Let's go ahead and listen in for the call out.
Stage 2
landing
terminal
burn.
guidance.
And there was that call out for the start of the Falcon 9 first stage landing burn.
Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And there you have it, successful landing of our Falcon 9 booster on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, in the Pacific Ocean. As a reminder, this was the 22nd launch and landing for this first stage.
And with a good 20-second landing of that first stage booster, the mission still continues for SpaceX, but because the NRO has requested, let's go ahead and listen to the SpaceX commentator for a second.
Free service in the area indicated here on the map until February 10th. The Starlink and T-Mobile teams have also enabled basic texting through our direct-to-cell satellites, so you can now text loved ones, text 911, and receive emergency alerts to your DTC-enabled cell phone. Make sure to follow @Starlink on X for updates as we work with local response teams on further opportunities to help, and check starlink.com/LA wildfires for more information. Thank you to our customer for entrusting us with today's mission, and we'd also like to thank the Range and FAA for their support. And if you're interested,
at this point, the upper stage is now in a coast phase and will continue on in the parking orbit until about T plus 52 minutes and 27 seconds. There will be a brief 2-second burn to circularize the orbit, and then there will be a deployment at an unspecified time. likely around the T+1 hour and 4 to 5 minutes, somewhere in that ballpark. These proliferated architecture missions pretty much follow to a T your typical Falcon 9 flights, so we'd expect a fairly similar deployment timeline as well. And with that, we're going to go ahead and turn to our mission stats in just a moment, but I want to thank a few more folks in the live chat for your support tonight. I want to thank Ian Lita for a $5 super chat, one of our channel members, saying hello, thanks, and Happy New Year to all Spaceflight Now family. Appreciate that, Lita. StormVet6, joining with channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, StormVet. Glad to have you with us. James Castile says, might snow tonight, north central Georgia. Go SpaceX, go Spaceflight Now. We'll hope you're all bundled up and staying warm there in Georgia then, if it's going to be snowing. Also want to thank Tate Alpha for a $2 super chat, saying big shout out from Santa Paula, California. With that, let's go ahead and take a look at our mission stats as they currently stand, with a good liftoff and landing of this Falcon 9 first stage booster, marking the end of flight number 22 for B-1071. This was also the 421st Falcon 9 launch to date, the fourth Falcon 9 launch of 2025. This was the 365th Falcon booster reflight, at the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's fourth orbital launch of the year, since there have been no Falcon Heavy missions as of yet. This was SpaceX's 135th orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 107th orbital launch from Space Launch Complex 4 East, and the 196th overall orbital launch from that particular pad. Moving on to some recovery stats, this was the 116th booster landing on the drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, the 314th SpaceX drone ship booster landing, and the 394th Falcon booster landing overall. Finally, with some industry stats on the year so far, this was the first orbital launch from the Golden State, the fourth orbital launch from U.S. soil, the fourth orbital launch from U.S. Rocket Company, and the fifth orbital launch from around the world. So far, no launch mishaps on the year. Here's where the pie chart currently stands. The U.S. with 4, China with 1 in this very early 2025. As you may have also seen, either by checking our launch schedule over on spaceflightnow.com, clicking the launch tab, we do have another Falcon 9 rocket poised and ready to launch coming up tomorrow morning at 11:21 a.m. Eastern, 16:21 UTC for those around the world. It's the Starlink 12-12 mission, a batch of 21 Starlink satellites, including 13 direct-to-cell capable Starlinks heading into low Earth orbit. Following that, we have, of course, the big planned launch for New Glenn, which went vertical on the pad earlier tonight, set to lift off at 1 a.m. Eastern, 0600 UTC. That's the start of a 3-hour window for this particular rocket. You see it standing there tall at Launch Complex 36. And you can keep your eyes on this rocket from now until launch day by heading over to our 24-hour live stream. That is Launchpad Live, where we're also keeping tabs, of course, on SpaceX's Starship rocket, which was just stacked on top of the Super Heavy booster. Preparation for Flight 7, targeting Monday afternoon from Starbase in Boca Chica Beach in southern Texas. Taking a look at the live camera, thanks to our friends at Lab Padre. Taking a look at the quick disconnect just above the top of the booster there. You see one of the grid fins pointing almost towards the camera. And then the hot stage ring just above that. In between the flights of New Glenn and Starship is another Falcon 9 launch, currently targeting Monday morning with a launch window that opens at 9:59 a.m. Eastern, 14:59 UTC. And that's over at Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. So lots going on in the realm of spaceflight in just the next few days. And we've got you covered on all angles of it. So if you haven't already, now's a great time to hit that subscribe button or become a channel member. Support what we do here at Spaceflight Now. Clicking that join button beneath this live stream right now. Help support what we do here at Spaceflight Now. Give the last word from the live chat to Honda Red Rider 450 with a very generous $20 super chat. Giving a shout to Michael, Stacy, Lane, Wyatt, and Owen. Stacy from Tehachapi, California. Appreciate the support. Also want to thank our wonderful moderators, Callistia Lee, Mark Otto, for helping out in the live chat tonight, and Astro Joe as well. Thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of this broadcast. And most importantly, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching from. Again, we've got lots more to cover, so we're going to go ahead and take the rest wherever we can sneak it in. And we'll be back with live launch coverage before you know it. So for all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.